Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Japan Talk. I'm Chase,
I'm Chaz.
and today we're going to talk about mainly Japanese technology
Mhm.
and some of the differences you'll see from Japan to America, and kind of just technology in general. We have a few interesting things we've discussed to talk about. So, do you want to start us off with some of the things we've prepared to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, everyone always thinks of, technology pretty much immediately when they are talking about Japan. I know ever since I was little, it was like the technology mecca of the world, with cheap electronics that were way more advanced than what we had here in America. I remember the first time we lived in Japan was when the flat screen TVs were first kind of coming out, and they were just exorbitantly expensive here in the US. And we were able to get one for like almost half the price of what we would be able to buy one here, in Japan. And it was like just this glorious moment where you could get really good, cheap electronics. And, today it's not quite the same in that regard, but, they still have like technology everywhere. It's like baked into their society, into their daily routine, from just little things. We'll talk about little things like they're, you know, just going shopping and going in and out of like buildings and stuff you see just in the common day to day as you go about your, going to work or to school, um, stuff in restaurants, stuff out in the streets that you come across. But we'll also talk a little bit about how Japan blends pretty seamlessly old and new. Um, that's kind of a common theme in their culture. With like
Right.
the old, shrines and temples are all old traditions. It's still very much a part of their culture today. But it's also their mentality of not ever wasting anything. Using something until it can't be used anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's old and it's not quite the one you want, just continuing to use it, because it's a waste not to.
Right. And even related to the way they present themselves and so many different things that run that same thought process of old and new blending together. That is really kind of one of the things that makes Japan so kind of mysterious in a way. I think to
Mm-hmm.
some people is um, how it's this technology mecca with this really rich ancient history and that's still pretty well preserved and in places. So um, kind of starting off, one of the things that I think that is really interesting, especially when you're looking at the topic of comparing the way we use technology to the way the Japanese use technology, is looking at something that is very commonplace in like day to day life. And one of the things that I thought was that I wanted to talk about the most when we started making this video, even though it's not a huge topic, but the way we use automatic doors.
Mm-hmm.
And why I want to talk about that first is because it's really tied into kind of a cultural difference in the way we use, as Americans use automatic doors, and the Japanese use automatic doors. Do you want to kind of explain to people why that difference exists, or why what kind of difference there is between the Japanese automatic door and
Yeah.
an American automatic door?
Yeah, I think, there's probably tons of different reasons why they, adopted the automatic doors on such a much larger scale than we have. I mean, here, it may be different from city to city. I know, like, some shopping malls here will have them. Grocery stores always have them for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
But really, aside from that, I mean, restaurants don't. Um, Regular stores, and out in the street, city front, roadside shop, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in Japan, like literally, unless you're going into an old building, like an
And
old house or an
right,
old or houses don't typically have them, but you're going into some cultural, like a temple or something that's older,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to have an automatic door. And it's going to be, you know, here the doors will like open and then they'll like stay open. And it's there. It's like they've done the programming needed to make it to where they're way more responsive.
Mm-hmm.
And then even during the winter, when it's cold, if it's like in a small store like a Combini, they'll have them to where they're closed, but you go up and there's like a tiny little button on both sides of the door that you just kind of tap. I mean, it's like a button, but you just barely put your hand up to it and
Mm-hmm.
the door opens. And I think the two reasons that come to mind is just the amount of foot traffic.
Mm-hmm.
There's just so much foot traffic in Japan compared to America.
Yeah, that'd be one of those things where, if they had every single door just automatically opening when someone was close to it, you'd be, just opening and closing all day long, just with the amount of people walking around, especially in certain areas. But yeah, I think that's definitely a huge aspect of the difference is that pedestrian culture
Mm-hmm.
of having more people walking around. And that's why I was really kind of curious to see, because I don't have a lot of experience when it comes to like big city life outside, like the big cities in the southeast. But I don't think that you would see that same type of culture as far as like automatic doors and
Mm-hmm.
automatic doors opening and closing all the time, because
Yeah.
they're really close together. But in Japan, I definitely like that push button concept. What's the other big thing that you think of when it comes to that?
The other thing I think of is probably cleanliness, and Japanese people tend to be more conscious about that.
Hmm.
So I can see not wanting to constantly be grabbing and touching handles. I kind of got to be a bit of a germaphobe to an extent after living in Japan for a while. Like,
Right.
you come back here and it's like you have to touch everything. It's like, no, I don't want to touch all these doors, bathroom doors, and
They were very early on to adapt things like the the different type of blowers you would have, like
mm-hmm.
not even necessarily the older style, like just blow down, but the ones
Mm-hmm.
that you're dipping your
You put
hands
your whole
in,
hand in, yeah.
which I think at first they said those were super sanitary. Then they found out that they really weren't that sanitary, or
Yeah.
at least one of the series of them
Yeah.
were pretty terrible. But yeah, they've always been really kind of early to adapt that
Mm-hmm.
kind of newer technology, probably because it's either made in Japan or
Probably.
developed in
Yeah.
Japan or at least in
That
Asia somewhere.
eventually makes its way here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the thing that was just always so frustrating here is that you go into a bathroom. This is almost any bathroom, even nowadays here. I mean, almost everywhere. So you open the door with your handle, it's dirty. You go into the bathroom, you go to the bathroom, you come out. They have an automatic water dispenser, for the sink. Oh, okay. They might have an automatic soap.
Mm-hmm.
They might have automatic, either a dryer or the automatic paper towels.
Mm-hmm.
But then you got to go open the door again
Right.
to get out. And I've noticed so many people nowadays will like take their paper towel that they dry themselves their hands with, and then like grab the door with
I
that
always
and
do
then
that.
throw it out.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I'm thinking like how do the Japanese really eliminate that? Because I'm trying to think of all the Japanese restrooms I've walked in, and a lot of them just don't have doors.
Yeah, yeah. It's like it's kind of like a mall. Some malls
like a mall,
here
yeah,
have that where you
or like
walk around a little
schoolhouse,
yeah, or the airport and stuff
right?
like that.
A lot of them are like that. Like your restaurants and stuff will have ones that are just regular ones with a handle or whatever.
Yeah.
But a lot of bathrooms are like that. Even like public bathrooms that you would find on like temple grounds, or I just know of a couple.
The school bathrooms were like that.
Right.
You walked in, it had just a 90-degree angle entry, and then you walked, and it was just right there. There's no doors. We could go on for a while about the bathrooms. One other thing that drives me nuts about the bathrooms here is the stalls have those little tiny like short half wall. It's like they didn't want to spend the extra money to actually continue it all the way to the ground.
Right.
So
Not to mention the fact that the door in front of you doesn't fit on at
it
all.
has like 3-inch gaps. People coming in with
Right. Yeah, it's like it's really depressing in certain areas. Like, you go into a hardware store and you're sitting down using the restroom and you're looking and you're like, you guys have every single tool available on the face of the planet in this building, and you can't make the door and the stall meet like properly to where the guy washing his hands, I'm not making eye contact with him, like during this process. I just think that's absurd. All the difference, and it's kind of related to technology, just because it's the way that they've decided to develop these different things, like the just intriguing and creative bathroom designs I've seen in Japan. As far as the way you would close the door to the stall, like especially some of the, like, I don't know if you'd say older, but some of the ones I found on like temple grounds, where they'll have like a curved door that then has like an intricate lock that locks it into place. So you have this tiny little corner, all to yourself, and there's nothing around you as far as, you're locked in a little box basically. No one's going to be peeking over, no little kids crawling underneath the stall, playing around.
Yeah.
I've just seen so many weird things like that, all because of that reason. And you just don't see that in a lot of times in Japan.
Yeah. The only way we'll ever get that is if the whole co-ed bathroom thing takes off here. There've been a few that co-ed bathrooms at various places I've worked where it's like the minute it's co-ed, it's like the wall, it's just a solid wall. Like it's not a stall, it's like a complete blocked off room for each stall.
Right.
It's still weird. It's weird coming out of the bathroom and having a woman standing there washing her hands.
I mean, maybe we'll save that topic for another podcast. Yeah, since we're talking about, bathrooms, might as well lead into another thing that's kind of pretty related to that as far as technology, and that's the different types of technology you see on a typical Japanese toilet compared to a typical, American toilet you would walk in and see at a mall or your friend's house, your house. When you walk into a Japanese bathroom in a mall or even, a nice apartment, what do you typically see?
Yeah, they usually have, one of those really fancy toilet seats that has a control panel on it. They'll usually, depending how fancy it is, all of them will have like a cleaning function and heat for the most part. But then some of them are like insane. They have like, massage, or they'll have like scent. They'll have like a perfume scent that it can do. It'll have different, like some do music nowadays, or flush noises, all these crazy features.
And they all have purpose. It's not like when we say it plays music, it's not like, oh, you're going to be listening to your Kanye, while you're using the restroom. It's typically to distract, the person next to you, to hear you from doing your business. Like you said, cleaning device, I assume you're referring to like a bidet. Sometimes mostly heated water bidets. And then a drying system, a fan that actually dries you off. You hear a lot of times people talking about how the Japanese don't really use a lot of toilet paper compared to the Americans, just because of those bidet systems. And I know I've been in the situation where I've gotten to the wrong bathroom and I quickly discovered that there wasn't any toilet paper. And that's when I started bringing my own toilet, like, my own tissues whenever I'm in Japan, just because I've been in that situation where I'm like, oh, I don't have any toilet paper.
Still some of the public bathrooms that, don't have any tissue or paper or anything.
And you'll very rarely find, this is just kind of a tangent on bathrooms, you'll very rarely find soap in bathrooms. So that's something that I always recommend if you're traveling to Japan, is to definitely pick up some hand sanitizer or just some pocket soap. I think hand sanitizer is kind of just a good coverall. I'm not usually a huge advocate of hand sanitizer, just because I think it's one of those things where it's like, if you use it too much, it's a bad thing. But if you're traveling, it's probably a good thing to have on you. But yeah, you definitely see all sorts of interesting options and some things that are very um, unique because you never really think about them, and that's like the seat lifting. A lot of them, if they'll have
Mm-hmm.
they'll have a mechanism that lifts the seat when you walk
Yeah.
in,
Or
you know,
lighting. A lot of them will have lights.
lights inside them, um, and it's all like you said earlier, kind of related to this. Um, I hate to say like germaphobe culture because I don't know. I think that's uh, generalizing a little bit, but you know this clean
Mm-hmm.
culture where I've read recently that you go into a bathroom and some of the most dirty things you touch are like the toilet seat and the soap, like you said
Yeah.
earlier, um, unless they have an automatic one. But yeah, it's all kind of designed to be really clean and um, yeah, maybe I'll throw the word healthy in there.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, Japanese toilets are definitely very advanced as far as I don't think the toilet's going any further than that. I
Yeah.
think that one's
There's not
capped out.
much. There's not much more it
Yeah,
can do for you.
yeah. Hopefully not, at least. So I think that one's done. Um, and then it doesn't just stop in the bathroom, right? It keeps going. Technology is kind of wrapped differently around the Japanese culture than it is in the American
Mm.
culture. And one way that they really interact with uh, technology that we actually are kind of starting to do this in certain places, and we'll kind of talk about that towards the end of this topic. But that's the way that technology and food interact.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when I say that, it's things like kaiten sushi.
Yeah.
For people that don't know, that's conveyor belt sushi.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So it's been around in Japan for quite a long time. I think a lot of Americans hear about conveyor belt sushi, and the premise is you sit at a table and the food comes around on a little conveyor belt, and you just kind of pick and choose which ones you want. But it's really more than that. I mean, I didn't realize how like much technology and just interesting little things they've put into these restaurants. As far back as like the early 2000s, there were conveyor belt sushi restaurants in Japan where you would have like, I mean, it's not the same as the ones now, but you'd have some sort of a tablet type interface where you
Mm,
could type, you could like click on certain foods that you wanted to order that were not just coming around on the main conveyor belt. And then they would have like a secondary little conveyor belt, up above maybe, where they would send you whatever you ordered specially on the side. And yeah, I remember the first time seeing that, it was just like, wow. It
mm-hmm.
was so advanced for the time. And now they've gotten even crazier. I mean, and we're slowly getting them here. We actually have one somewhere, somewhat close now to where we live. And, we'll probably be going there at some point, to check it out.
Right, definitely. Looking forward to that. I
Yeah.
always love conveyor belt sushi. Just the experience in itself.
Mm-hmm.
You could put cans of chicken on the plates, and I'd still probably have a pretty
Yeah.
fun time just picking out little plates and uh, counting them up to see how much I spent.
Yeah.
And that's another kind of cool thing is a lot of these restaurants will have the little plate counters.
Mm-hmm.
You go to your the very end of the meal and you just kind of toss your plates in and it'll count all the different types of plates and
Yeah.
total up your bill for you.
Yeah. Many of the ones we went to were, for Japan, it was a fairly large restaurant. I mean, not for here, but for Japan, they were fairly large, family style, what they call family, style eating, places in Saitama. It's mostly families.
Mm,
And there, as far as the staff required for that restaurant, there were maybe, three or four chefs preparing the food because, you still have to prepare all the food for the people. There was maybe one or two tops
right.
other staff, just cleaning up the tables. There was no need for
Mm-hmm.
there were no waiters, there were no like hostesses or anything, or people needing to ring you up the register because everything was taken care of right there at the table. You would
Mm,
eat, you would get your plates and choose whatever you wanted. If you wanted to order a special menu item, you would do that, and it would come to you on the little delivery thing. And then when you're done, you just put all your plates in this little slot,
Mm-hmm.
and it would count it up and tell you your total, and
Right.
you'd just pay right there. You'd pay with cash. You could put a lot of them had a little machine like at a grocery store where you just
Mm-hmm.
put in the cash and it gives you your change. Nowadays, I'm sure they have pay with your phone or whatever.
Yeah, and one of the things I love about those style of restaurants where there's not a lot of human interaction is you don't feel too guilty when you're ordering dessert either.
Yeah,
You just flick to the next screen on the tablet, and there it is.
and that's the thing that's interesting is the desserts with the kaiten sushi places. I don't think it's quite the same here. Maybe they'll eventually kind of offer the same stuff, but in Japan, the desserts that are really popular are like these crazy like parfait creations,
Mm.
and many of the kaiten sushi places would put these fancy parfait things up on there to where you could get any number of those as a dessert, or you
Mm.
could custom order one. But yeah, that was really really popular back when we were living in Japan.
Right.
But you don't even think of like sushi and then having a dessert parfait.
Mm. As far as other type of foods that technology is kind of tied into, you can also look at places like certain ramen restaurants. Or when I say
Mm,
certain, I mean basically any ramen restaurant
just
that's a
about,
ramen
unless it's
restaurant.
like a really generic fast food
Mm-hmm.
ramen kind of place.
Right. Or even places like Yoshinoya, a lot of these like kind of
Mm,
24-hour rice bowl kind of restaurants will all have vending machines essentially, or
mm-hmm,
ticket machines that you'll go up to, and typically like the top left button is going to be like the most popular
mm-hmm,
dish. It's
yeah.
usually a different color, or we're seeing a lot, especially with the preparation of Japan's Olympic run for, or Olympic hosting in 2020. You're seeing a lot of English,
Yeah.
a lot more English, and there's always been. Even when I first went to Japan in 2010, there was still a significant amount of English translations for different menus, and signs for traffic and things like
Mm-hmm,
that. But um, it's just continuing to really just develop
yeah.
and develop, and it's not too hard to order from these machines, so don't feel intimidated by going up to them. And yeah, you basically put your money in, select what you want. It'll dispense a ticket for each item that you hit. Don't go too fast. Take it
Yeah.
nice and slow. I've seen some people get pretty panicked because they'll put the money in, and then they're pushing the button and they're pushing it
They
twice. The next
order
thing you know,
several
they've
of the
ordered
same dish.
two of the same main
Yeah.
meal. So
And that falls under the category of putting the bus ticket in the wrong slot. It's like
right,
you order like three or something, you're going to be standing around for a
right.
good bit trying to get your money back. It's not part of the standard process there.
right. But yeah, they dispense a ticket, and then you give those tickets directly to the person cooking your food, or sometimes a staff member. And that's one of the things I really like, because you're almost guaranteeing you're going to get exactly what you ordered. You're not playing this
Mm-hmm.
game of like telephone with a waiter who maybe they have a piece of paper. I know a lot of times the waiters like to kind of show
Just trying to
off. That's
memorize.
like
Yeah.
their kind of peacocking kind of attitude when it comes to showing off by not writing anything down. And hey, sometimes it impresses me. I've definitely
Yeah.
gotten impressed by a waiter memorizing an order for 7 people.
Mm-hmm.
That's super cool that you can do that. But at the same time, if my steak isn't cooked right, I'm going to be kind of annoyed.
Yeah, you get
So,
the wrong one. Your grandfather orders, super well done, and you want rare, and
right,
you get
you
his.
get them flipped. But I really like that concept of yeah, here's exactly what I want
Mm-hmm.
written on tickets.
Yeah,
Please serve them to me in a few minutes.
and I think most of this technology, at least around these restaurant ideas that we're talking about, to me, just talking about them now, it really reduces the number of people you need to operate a restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
I remember like most Yoshinoyas have like one guy in there,
Right.
making the, I don't know if he's making the food, but serving up the dishes. You get your little ticket and
Mm-hmm.
you go and you sit. It's usually like in this little kind of square design,
Right.
and he's in the middle with all the stuff. It's like you only need like one or two people,
Mm-hmm.
max, maybe three to run this whole thing. Where he's here, and you go to McDonald's here, and you have like 30 people crammed in the back.
Right.
None of them are doing anything. Like two dudes are working.
Yeah, it's not very efficient compared to the way the Japanese handle it,
Yeah.
and the way they have that assistance. They have that
Mm-hmm.
robotic assistance because a lot of times, because at the end of the day, if we're talking about robots making jobs easier, at the same time they're also taking away jobs, so it's kind of a sad thing. But you still have to think that um, when those human beings are involved, they might be doing a great job of greeting the customer and sitting them at the right
Mm-hmm.
table or whatever. But at the same time, like, they can be a distraction to other workers, and, which is cuts down into efficiency pretty
Mm-hmm.
quickly.
Yeah.
So I think that it's definitely nice to see that efficient way, but at the same time, it's kind of scary to see the robots slowly take over jobs more and more because we already seen at the grocery store.
Yeah. Well,
So
they have the robot restaurants over there. They have a
right,
few.
yeah, robot restaurants, robot hotels,
Mm-hmm.
where you don't interact with human beings at all. So I mean, it's possible at this day and age we can do it fairly easily, but uh, definitely something to appreciate and to be weary of at the same time. But on a more positive note, speaking about these kind of vending machines that you run into at certain restaurants, you're going to run into a lot of different vending machines on the side of the road, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they've taken their vending machine technology to a whole new level. Um, Anytime I show anybody, the Japanese vending machines versus even our newest ones, they're always just mesmerized at how could they be so different? At what point did the vending machine basically remain the same here,
Mm-hmm.
versus over there it just changed, drastically. They'll have, first off, one of the biggest differences is they'll have a selection of like 20 plus maybe,
Yeah.
different items,
Yeah, it's definitely fair to say.
way more than us. I mean, we have sometimes you'll get one of those weird ones here where it has like the little slide. Have you seen those where it has like a track with like a little
Oh, yeah, yeah,
slide and a
yeah.
little slide, and it
Mm-hmm.
kind of like goes, oh, and it slides over and then
Mm-hmm.
grabs your drink. Those will have they'll have quite a few slots. Most of the time it's like the same five products,
Right.
in all 30 slots or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But
And at the end of the day, they're all soda.
yeah, and that's the big difference is that, yeah, here it's all soda, maybe water.
Mm-hmm.
And over there you have like coffees, all different types of coffees with just black, with milk and sweetener. You have all different teas, usually a couple different kinds of green tea or barley tea or oolong tea.
Mm.
Um,
Fruit juices,
Fruit juices of all different kinds. You will have different sodas.
flavored watered and waters.
Mm,
Yeah, a lot of different options. And then as far as the options goes, is also a lot of different options in how you pay. You can pay with your bus card or your train
mm,
card, the Suica or Pasmo. You can pay with your phone. You can pay with cash. There's a lot of different options. Um,
and it's cheap. I
mm-hmm.
mean, compared to here, I know we don't really use vending machines, at least around here, very often, but it's usually when you're somewhere where there's really nowhere to get a drink, and they'll have a vending machine, and it's almost like you're being taken advantage of.
Yeah, and it's a lot of times it's more of like a, oh hey, there's a vending machine. Let's get something out of it because we haven't seen the vending
I
machine in a
know
while.
it's been,
Like,
yeah,
that's,
yeah.
I know, like when I was a kid, you'd go to like the movies and they'd have like the candy and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
that, I see the candy every time I come to the movies, but then there'd be that vending machine that, they just got, and I'd be like, oh, let me take a peek at that. It's all
Yeah.
the same stuff, but I want to try it because I haven't seen one.
Mm-hmm.
Or you'll see them in places like it is kind of predatory. Like it's, going to be at a break room or something like that at work.
Yeah.
But
I mean, even I know this makes no sense. We have like an open air mall near us that has tons of restaurants, tons of places to get drinks for, you know, regular prices. But they have these, vending machines out there, and it's like $2.75 for a can of Coke or some ridiculous thing.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I've always kind of taken into consideration is a lot of the sodas and stuff like that you're seeing in Japan are, I feel like, in smaller can sizes
Yeah.
that you're going to see. So, like, maybe that helps kind of reduce the price. But maybe that would help a lot of other factors in American culture if you reduce the sizes of the typical can of Coke
Yeah.
coming out of a vending
Yeah.
machine.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's it's different. Um, they have most of the time smaller, especially at like the fast food restaurants. Their large is like our small, or
Mm.
maybe medium, if that,
Right.
somewhere in between a small and a medium. But yeah, we were lucky enough right outside of the very bottom of our staircase coming down from our apartment. There was a Pepsi vending machine,
Mm-hmm.
and it was one of the only ones that had Mountain Dew.
Yep.
And they have them here. It actually, I found, it's like I call it like the tall boy can. It's like
Right.
it's a tall can, so it's actually bigger than a regular
It's a
can.
20 ounce instead
Yeah.
of a 16.
And they had that Mountain Dew can, that, and it was like 100 yen, might have been
Right.
110 yen.
Mm-hmm.
That was nice. It was like the only place we could ever find Mountain Dew.
And one of the other things that's great about these vending machines and kind of involved in technology is that if it's winter, you can get a hot drink. They're nice and heated for you, and they're indicated by having a red highlight on the name. Or you can get, a lot of times you can get the same drink cold.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
Yeah,
one
the
of the really cool
coffees
things.
that's really good for the coffees. You can get them hot in the winter or cold in the summer.
Sometimes even they'll have like corn soup or some
Yeah,
certain just
yeah,
wintertime exclusive drinks, or I guess soups you could call them.
yeah.
And they're actually pretty good.
Oddly enough, they're good.
The corn one, the one that I had that was corn, and like if I see it in a cone beanie, a convenience store, I pick it up as well because it's delicious. I mean, uh,
It's
corn
like
soup in a can is on point.
it's almost like drinking corn cake,
Mm,
like warm corn cake.
yeah, nice and sweet. Yeah, it'd be great with like some cornbread,
Yeah.
like corn overload. And then kind of continuing on with the idea of food, that restaurant theme. A lot of restaurants nowadays you can go into and they'll hand you like a tablet, and that tablet will have the ability to click over to English or several other different languages, and you can order from their menu with pictures and English translations.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another way that technology has kind of um, gotten involved with the Japanese culture, which we might see in certain parts of the United States, but I know where we're from, where we exist on a daily basis. We don't have a lot of culture coming from all over the world in the suburbs of Georgia. Um, so you don't see a lot of places that need a translated menu into Chinese or Korean or Japanese or whatever it may be. Um, I know even that sometimes we'll have people at work that we need to locate someone that speaks Spanish, um, and that's like a pretty rare scenario even in itself. But yeah, we just don't really see that same need to have that kind of availability. But at the same time, it's so great to see, um, really nice pictures of all the food, and it's easy to order something whenever you want to order.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of that kind of ties into the fact that most of our restaurants aren't like a tapas style, and there's a lot of tapas style kind of restaurants in Japan.
Yeah. Yeah, but even the tablets aside, before tablets, before they started doing that, with which I think we're starting to go. I mean, we've seen like McDonald's and Taco Bell here, where
Right.
they don't take your order anymore; you choose it on a tablet. I think that really helps with your order accuracy for sure.
Doesn't doesn't Chili's do something on a tablet nowadays? Like, don't you pay with a tablet or
It's Applebee's.
Applebee's?
Yeah,
I knew that there was one of the chains or a couple of the chains that are doing
fancy,
yeah, that fancy
fancy
dining.
restaurant. But but even before the tablets in Japan, most restaurants, family style restaurants, ramen shops, small shops, whatever, your table will have a little call button. So instead of just sitting there kind of hoping that your waiter or waitress will see you
Right.
raising your hand, I mean, you don't want to
They're
be
diligent.
rude. You don't want to be like, hey, and be rude, but at the same time, you're like, please notice me. I need water.
Right. I want to order. I'm in a hurry.
It makes it easy because then, the person helping you knows, okay, well, my table, needs help. I'll go as soon as I can. And you can order or whatever. I think that's a technology that, why don't we have that? I mean,
Right.
that is something very easy and simple.
And that's, maybe I've said this in another podcast, and I don't think this is 100% accurate statement, but that's how I usually know that a restaurant is like really authentic when it comes to Japanese food. When I'm in the United States, is when they have a call
Little
button.
call button.
I always know, like, okay, this place seems pretty legit, And that's something I really didn't think about as far as technology involved with food. But that's totally something that's pretty relevant.
Yeah.
It's a big difference. Um, and they also have more of kind of just a difference in the way you interact at a restaurant a lot of times, especially like places like izakaya. If they don't have that call button, maybe America had this a long time ago, and maybe we can talk about that more later. But that sumimasen culture, or that yelling "excuse me" culture, you don't really have that in America. You don't do that in 2019. You don't yell out and go "excuse me," at a restaurant. That's not. If you do, you're rude. You're looked at as rude. Where that's not really rude in Japan. So that's something that's kind of interesting as well.
Yeah, a culture that's very quiet and reserved. For most situations, they do have that. I mean, that's one of the few times where you can, be loud in the middle of whatever you need. Just throw down a sumimasen and you're good. That and the vendors outside their shops yelling about their sales.
Right, definitely. But don't talk on the train.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of trains, that's something that's also pretty heavily related to technology. You want to talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, their train system is just amazing. I mean, I've had limited experience with several different train systems here in America, and it's just like so much more advanced than anything we have here. It's just, again, it's like built into their daily lives. You live around a train station for the most part. I mean, you plan your life and your commute and your activities and everything is centered around whatever station it is you live closest to. For the most part. I mean, if you live like way out in the sticks, it's different. But
right.
And they make it convenient. From when they first rolled out, no longer needing a paper ticket. I remember they started using the cards, the little magnetic cards, and you'd have to load money on them every so often. And then they went to like the Passmo and Suica card, where it was a little more advanced. You could buy commuter passes on it. You could put a lot of money on it. You could spend money that's on your Passmo or Suica at all different places. Anywhere, any of the shops and the stations, most convenience stores will have a little scan option where you can pay with your Passmo or Suica.
Vending machines as well. You
Yeah.
can use them to pay for a drink or whatever you're looking to buy from a vending machine. Well, a lot of these vending machines around Japan.
Yeah, and it's one of those little fun, little kind of fun things. You're over there, you're teaching English, you're, spent a little too much money, maybe, partying or whatever, and then you're like, oh, I need to go get food, and you don't have any money left at the end of the day, and you're like, oh, wait, I put 20,000 yen on my Passmo, and I don't really need it all.
Right.
That's always kind of a fun, a fun thing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and they have it to where you can like now link it up with your phone. Before that, they had like phone cases where you just slide your card in, but now I think it's all you can link it up on an app on your phone.
Right. Yeah, I was looking into that the other day, and it's really impressive. You have the pass on your phone, and you can add money from anywhere because it's on your phone. You can use your debit card. You can still recharge it in the station using the machines. You just set your phone in with the app open, and you can still use it even to pay for things at vending machines and at
Mm-hmm.
phone beanies as well. So I thought that was really cool. Not sure if it's an iPhone exclusive feature. I know that iPhones can do it, but if it is, I might be getting an iPhone before I go to Japan again, just because I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and just like the speeds of their trains, like the Shinkansen.
Mm-hmm.
I know. I think we were talking about how they can go up to like 200 miles an hour,
Yeah.
which is just
Just
insane.
insane.
Which I almost feel like I've spoken about this on the podcast just because I thought it was really weird. Um, it made sense to me, but at the same time, I just thought it was kind of odd. If you're going to Japan and you get a JR pass, which I highly recommend you do, if you're planning on using Shinkansen, even if you're just going to be using it a couple of
Mm-hmm.
times, um,
Yeah, definitely
you
worth it.
you can get a pass depending on the exchange rate for like $300 to $350. It lets you use any JR system, train, and the Shinkansen, but it doesn't let you ride the fastest Shinkansen. You have
Yeah.
to ride like the second
This,
fastest or
yeah.
like the third
Yeah.
fastest Shinkansen. Which wouldn't you think that if you're
A
like a
foreigner
foreigner
going
coming
over, yeah.
through, like
Tourism.
tourism, you're trying to like show them you're like you're, look how cool Japan is, look how great this country is. Don't you think you're gonna be like, oh,
Yeah.
let's show them the fastest train, but at the same time, I respect that they're like, okay, people, this is reserved for either Japanese citizens
Mm-hmm.
or people willing to pay the ticket price.
Yeah.
So I do respect that. I think that that maybe probably is for the best, but I thought that was kind of funny. I thought it was like, man, you're gonna make me ride this slower train, take me an extra 20 minutes,
Yeah.
but
Well, it just shows how popular it is. I think there's just a huge popularity, not just for travel sake, but I think there's a lot of Japanese that are just, you know, they're excited about riding that kind of a train. You know,
mm,
this new fast train. I remember when it first came out. I think it was the Nozomi. It was like the bullet train that basically looks like Hatsune Miku. They tried to name it Hatsune Miku because that was the year she was so popular,
oh
and
my gosh,
they refused, and it's actually the color, like it's the color of her, but they refused to name it that. But it, you know, it's it'll eventually get to where they'll come out with a faster one, and then I remember when it came out, like prior to that, like you had to take like the original, like you know, Shinkansen, I think that
mm,
was like much slower.
I didn't even consider that.
And then when that one came out, they kind of bumped all the tiers down, I think.
Right. So give it another 10, 15 years and I'll be on the faster one, but
Yeah,
there'll be a faster one.
yeah. Be like a, they've tested the 200 miles an hour is what they go like typically on like some of the longest stretches, like the Tohoku, I think, line, the one that goes up to northern Japan. I think
Mm.
is that one that hits the 200 miles an hour. But they've supposedly tested it going up to like 260 something miles an hour,
Wow.
which is just crazy. And it doesn't feel. I mean, it feels like you're just coasting along,
Yeah.
you know, smooth.
I mean, one of my favorite, I know I've talked about this before, but one of my favorite things to do on the Shinkansen, unfortunately, is to have a cigarette.
Hmm.
They have a
Yeah,
great
smoking
smoking
car.
section.
Yeah.
Usually, you'll have a nice big window, so you have a nice, beautiful view of the small towns you're passing by or whatever nice scenery you're passing by. And sometimes they're small. Sometimes it'll be like a two-person room. Sometimes you'll have enough space to fit like six people in there. So that'll kind of depend on what car you're in. But that in itself is kind of a cool thing about
Mm-hmm.
technology mixed in. You have a heavy smoking culture, so during a lot of your transportation, that's more long term transportation. You have a lot of
Yeah.
more options to dip away and smoke a cigarette.
Yeah. And the food, they have food carts that come through, you know, that offer different foods and beverages.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, they have bathrooms. You
Right.
can go to the bathroom at 200 miles an hour on the
Very
train.
similar. Feels very similar to using a restroom on a plane. Like
Mm-hmm.
very,
Yeah.
very similar experience. Um, yeah, I think the whole train system and the fact that you can use your pass mode to do so much, I think that's really
Mm-hmm.
impressive. Um, other than that, is there anything big to talk about in stations or trains or any other technology related to that?
Well, I mean, at the stations, you have your buses as well as your taxi corrals. They'll have some of those where they'll have like a big taxi
Mm,
corral. I remember the first time I took a taxi in Japan. You walk up, and they're these older model cars. I'm wanting to say they're like Toyota Cressidas or something.
mm,
They're all this like pretty much the same model, older looking Japanese sedan,
right, boxy.
but very boxy, not very high tech looking by any means.
Mm,
Nowadays, you'll see some. They did kind of make a shift towards Priuses, in the
right,
last several years. But you walk up to this car thinking, this is an old car, and all of a sudden the door just like kind of goes and opens, and the guy kind of like he usually has his seat to where he can like kind of lean back and he'll like say, "Oh, come on in." And they have like their little white gloves on and their little hat,
right,
and you're like, okay, so yeah, they have like automatic doors, where the driver hits the button and the door swings open, and then you get in and he hits the button again and it shuts.
right.
Shuts. You don't have to touch it.
And that's, I think, one of the hardest things to get, like, processes to get through correctly.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about for anyone else, but for me, whenever I go to Japan, I always have to remind myself when I'm getting in and out of a taxi. And it might be because alcohol's involved, but typically I'm like, okay, don't touch the door, don't touch the door, don't touch the door. And if I'm with like a large group of people, typically someone touches the door.
Yeah.
And it's after I've told them 4 or 5 times, hey, don't touch that door, it's going to close itself, remember that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that always gets me. It's one of those very interesting things. And I think that could be related to kind of that cleanliness factor a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Also, just the hospitality that's
Yeah.
um, just bleeds from Japanese culture. Um, I bet a taxi driver one day, after getting out of his car to open a door for his guests every single day, said, "Hey, I can do this better." you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and so
Definitely.
I'm
Yeah.
sure
I'm
that
sure that's what it
I'm
was.
sure that has some pretty interesting origins.
Yeah. I've never seen such dedicated people working as taxi drivers as you see in Japan.
Mm,
I mean, there's no way. There's probably can't possibly be a single person here in the states that's a taxi driver that's as passionate about their job as
right,
the average Japanese taxi driver. I mean,
right.
they're
So that's the big thing. It's like there might be someone as passionate, there might be someone as you know, I don't know, whatever other word you describe them as, but it's the average in Japan. That's just
mm-hmm,
the typical,
yeah.
that's just how it is. They're just so dedicated and they're willing to help you in every way and very friendly
They're
and
usually little old men,
mm-hmm.
and they'll come running out, trying to get your 100-pound suitcase out of the back of their car that
Right,
weighs more than them.
right. Yeah, I think one of those other things kind of related to taxis and automatically opening is a lot of these apartment complexes I've been using when I travel to Japan. A lot of times I'll use like an Airbnb, and a lot of these apartments will have access via some sort of automatic lock. Whether it's the front door to the apartment, um, the complex as a whole, so you're trying to get into like the main office or main lobby where like the elevator is, or the actual door leading into the room you're renting. I've seen it go both ways, and that's something that I think is really interesting because you're kind of seeing that in America in some
A
aspects. You're
little
seeing
bit,
more of
yeah.
like homes, nicer homes or upgraded homes having locks that have some sort of pin pad.
Yeah,
Um,
or like a virtual key on your phone.
right, like we're seeing more and more of those. But to see that on an apartment complex, especially in Japan, once again, kind of related to that commuter or that pedestrian culture of having more people
Mm,
walking around close quarters to these doors, having access to these areas.
yeah,
I think that kind of comes in why that is in existence.
yeah,
Definitely something interesting involving technology.
yeah. You really just see technology, everywhere. Just so much more, widely used and embedded in everything over there than you do here. I mean, just speaking about apartment complexes, most apartment complexes, especially like in Tokyo, it's almost more like a hotel. The feel, at least, is almost more like a hotel versus like an apartment complex you'd find here. Even if it's like a 2 or 3 story building, it has elevators. It has like enclosed hallways usually with like doors, off to the side that are the apartments.
Mm.
Whereas here you have that whole style where I mean we even have like 4 or 5 story apartments. They don't have elevators anywhere. It's all
Right.
these huge giant concrete stairs going up, and then it's all open. The corridors are all just open to the staircases going up, and it's just more. It's more open. You're out in the open. I think there's a lot more crime around our apartments because they're pretty much out there in the open. Anyone can just kind of go in.
Right. Especially
You
in certain areas.
But yeah, it's. I was really impressed. We did a lot of searching for apartments and stuff while we were there, trying to find. When we moved, we wanted to try to find a new apartment closer into central Tokyo, and just so many of them were so neat. You know, there was one that had like a whole air filtration system where it had all these little like vent things that you could like push, and it would like a little vent thing would pop out, and it would supposedly bring in like fresh air from the outside.
Hmm.
Like recirculate it. Um, there were several that had all kinds of crazy like hideaway storage, hideaway desks. There was one where like the whole apartment was like shiny white, like lacquered finish. Basically, it was like the most modern apartment you've seen in your life,
Right.
and it was basically one big rectangular box studio style apartment,
Mm.
but it was pretty big. And at the very end of it, opposite the front door when you came in, it was just glass, and it looked out onto like one of the big major crossings in Shibuya.
Mm.
And there was like on the side of the wall, you would like hit a button, and this like glass, not glass, it was the same material. It was that white kind of lacquered, shiny material. Desk would like slide out. Like this little thing would pop out, and it would like slide out all the way across the room to where you had like this big desk.
Hmm.
And then when you were done, you'd hit the button and it would go back. I'm assuming that's like part of being the studio apartment. You'd need to be able to like bring your bed out or your futon or whatever, and then kind of put it away
Right.
during the day. But yeah, just it was really neat. They were all different. Every apartment we looked at was completely different. Um, the newer ones were really advanced.
And it's like you said, like technology is really everywhere in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you'll see this more so in like larger cities in the United States. But even looking at things like the TV screens inside of buildings and
Yeah,
all the kind of neon light kind of things you see throughout the certain areas of Tokyo.
yeah, the stuff that I mean, we pretty much only see it in New York. I mean, the only place I can think of is in New York City, Times Square. You have like the big, huge
Mm.
jumbotron. I mean, they have like tons of those. I
Right.
mean, every
Everywhere.
every major city has like several of them in there, like this, in like all the stations. It's
Right.
like,
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where if it's done properly, it can be really, really pretty and appealing. Where I think at some point you can look at those and kind of view them as eyesores.
mm-hmm,
You're just saying, "Oh, you're throwing ads in my face. I don't like this." But um, maybe because they're just foreign to me. But I look at those in Japan and I really appreciate them. But I'd be curious to think what the typical Japanese person thinks of when they see big ads
mm-hmm.
when they're walking through Shibuya Crossing. If anyone ever watches this and has an answer to that, feel free to comment down below and let me know. I'd be really interested. Once again, as a Japanese person, how do you feel if when you're seeing big ads as you're walking across Shibuya Crossing on the buildings? Are they eyesores, or do you think they're pretty sometimes?
Hmm.
Be kind of interesting to find out.
Yeah, yeah, and it'd be interesting to know what maybe what's your favorite kind of technology that's in the daily life. Living in Japan, that we don't necessarily have here. Maybe something we forgot to talk about, or
Mm-hmm.
something that that we did talk about. Or maybe vice versa. Maybe there's something over here that if you're a Japanese person living over here in America and you came here and noticed we have something really different that
Right.
is not typical.
Or if you're an American or Western person living in Japan that misses some sort of technology that you used to have access to
Hmm.
in America, it'd be interesting to find out what that is.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
definitely. Yeah, feel free to comment, and we'll try to address that on our next one.
right. Well, I think that was a pretty good conversation on technology. Is there anything else you
Yeah.
want to discuss tonight?
No, I'm good. I'm excited to go try some kaiten sushi maybe for next time.
Yeah, I think next podcast will be posted on next month. So I think we might start trying to do a food video once a month. We had a lot of fun doing the takoyaki and
Hmm.
uh, okonomiyaki.
Yeah, it was surprisingly good.
So
I didn't think it would be very good.
I think that's got us a little intrigued to maybe doing another food video. So maybe we'll have some kaiten sushi in our future.
Yeah, yeah, that would be fun.
Well, once again, thanks for watching Japan Talk. I'm Chase.
Yeah, and Chaz here. Thanks for watching.
Bye.
Peace.